Hello, I'm ED-SKaR, and today I have finally got hold of the 3rd edition BoltAction Rulebook, and so I will be having a look at that today. For any one of the 3 of you in chat, can I have an audio check to make sure you can hear me? The audio and the music is not too loud either, and then we'll get cracking and get stuck in. I do have, off to the side of my screen here, the 2nd edition rulebook of BoltAction, so we can confirm. I also have Case Blue, Tank War, Soviet Union, and the Armies of Great Britain as well, because all of these books, oh, and the rulebook, all of these books, over £100 worth of books there, that is now obsolete. Just throw them in the bin, why not? There's absolutely no reason to still own them, because we're on 3rd edition now. Got our nice American chap on the front who's giving us a wave and also shooting us. Must be from Texas. Interestingly, I was just looking at the covers before the stream started, and I was comparing them a little bit, because the layout of the cover is kind of similar. Nice big logo, as you would expect. Big character artwork, that's good, similar to how it is previous, although it's a bit differently laid out. We've gone from a German on the 2nd edition to an American. Knocking my camera already, that's a good start. To an American on the new one. On the backs, we've gone from an American on 2nd edition to a German on 3rd edition. So they've just swapped, which is interesting. The background art is actually quite a nice one. It's Americans and Japanese. Sorry, British and Japanese. That's a Bren gun. On 2nd edition was Germans and British. So we've still got some Brits on the cover, just less of them. Thank you, Rainick. Audio sounds okay from me. Thank you. It's always a good one to get that out of the way before the amount of streams. If anyone's been around for a while, you know the amount of streams I start for the first 20 minutes. My microphone is muted. So I always like to get that one out of the way first. You can't see this on the camera. I'm pretty sure you can't see this on the camera. Can we see it on this camera? Oh, we can see it just about there. There is a map. So in the black space here, there's the outline, very faint outline of a map. And it seems to be French countryside. I think. Based on the place names. Colleville, Moucouen, Hall de Verson, and Verson, Carpiquet, Franqueville, and so on and so forth. It sounds French, it might not be. Whereas on the 2nd edition rulebook, the same equivalent, dead space, is just blank. There's no detailing in there. I don't know why I've spent so long talking about the cover of the book, as if we care about the cover of the book. Let's have a look inside, shall we? So all the legal information on the front and the contents. So as we expect, we've got the history, 50 pages worth of history, 40 pages worth of history, because the first 10 are other things. We're looking through. Oh, okay. Okay. First point of comparison. 2nd edition rulebook. The contents page is 2 sides. And that's it. 3rd edition. The contents page is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sides. So that is a lot more, either a lot more stuff or a lot more detail in terms of the headers. So we're seeing the different headers of different things there. And that, I think that's definitely a good thing. That's going to help find stuff. The amount of times where there's the one thing that you can't remember where it is in the 2nd edition rulebook, and you go looking in the contents page, and you're like, is it under this section? Is it under HQ? Is it under weapons? Is it under this? That? Not sure. Someone rumoured to me a little while ago that there was an index. And there is. Oh. Oh. An actual index. Three sides worth of index. And mine's already got a horrible mark on it. Is that mark meant to be there? Oh, you... Dear book creators, stop doing this. I hate this so much. Can you see it there? Can we see it on this camera? No. Ooh, good grip. There we go. That is an image of a crease in the page. It is not actually a crease in... You can actually see the ghost of it all the way back there. Every single page has the same crease. Ugh. Why would you do such a thing? What was that? Excuse me for 1 second. My apologies. Yeah. So we have the background of every single page is an image of a page. And it's got a crease on it running through the middle. And so you have a crease on every single page. Right. I've been distracted long enough by things that don't matter. Let's have a look at the contents page. So like we mentioned, history is coming first. Yeah, invasion of 1939 into 1940, jumping through to the big stuff happening in mid-war. It's a brief summary of World War II, as you might expect. I don't think I'm going to be reading through much of that today. Ooh, that's a nice little map there. Do we have much in the way of maps? I think there will be another map elsewhere, or several other maps elsewhere. That's quite nice. I like that. So this is some points of interest for the North African campaign, and then moving off into Italy, 1943 and 44. Hello, Paul. Well, let's just move on to kind of how do you play war games? Important stuff for those who haven't necessarily been around war games. It's sometimes difficult for the experienced amongst us to think like that, because we know to use a tape measure rather than a ruler. We know to use D6, we know what that means, and D12s and D2s and D3s, and all of the other things like how to place models and the dice bag, although that's specifically for that. My microphone's actually on full power, but I'm going to pull the music down a little bit. There you go. That's about as good as it gets. Yeah, it's hard for us to think of it this way sometimes, but someone coming into a war game, if this is their first book, they do need it explained. And it's only a little paragraph explaining how it's not like holding their hand through everything, but just to say models move and they move specific distances, so use the tape measure, use dice for the random nature of things, and the discussion of order dice, because that's a fundamental part of this specific game. But I'm going to quite happily skip over all of that because that's not changing. Measuring distances. So what I do want to check, because we had this discussion for 2nd edition, is that an infantry model is on a 25mm base, and 25 by 50, which is the pill base for prone, cavalry and motor. Oh, let me read the words in order, because that makes sense. That's how words work. Hello, Ranger. How are you doing? So, yeah, this is... I have a video on this subject when we were talking about 2nd edition, and so this looks like it's exactly the same in terms of multi-bases. So when you have like an artillery piece commonly, although there are other cases where you do it, you have multiple infantry models on a base. The crew of an artillery piece is the most common, and that's called a multi-base. And each crew member is considered to be a 25mm circle on that larger base. So the larger base that you've physically put everything on doesn't really count, doesn't matter for the game, and each individual crew member and the gun is where they are based on the base that they would have if they were separate. So that is... And I think that's actually a really important part of how Warlord have built BoltAction. Going back to 2nd edition, I don't know how it was in 1st. But just allowing players to build their models however you want. Ranger asks, good, yes. Excited for any of the new minis? Oddly, I want the truck. As embarrassing as it is, I actually do like the British truck. I can't remember what it's called. In terms of most of the infantry, American infantry and German infantry, I've got loads of both. The Fallschirmjäger Winter and American Army Winter. I've got a lot of Americans and Germans, so I don't need any more infantry. It looks like the Fallschirmjäger are the old Fallschirmjäger kit, just with the uniforms changed. Like the arm positions seem very, very similar, which is fine. But the British, is it a Bedford truck? It might be a Bedford. It's got a little brain gunner sticking out the top. I don't know why, but it's just a truck. As boring as it is, I really want the truck. Where was I? Yes. Multi-bases seem to be working the same as previously, so that's fine. So, distance between units. Oh, that's interesting. I might be overreaching. Paul said, that truck is what I was too. That truck is what I was too. Grammar, please. You were interested in. Ranger says, it's not embarrassing. More British models are always a fine addition to a collection. Yes. I actually want to have... like, for 2nd edition, it was my ideal collection, is that you'd have a light tank, an armoured car, and an unarmoured truck transport for every faction. I had that for my Soviets, I had that for my Americans, I had that for my Germans, but I didn't have it for the... Oh, and my Italians I've got it for, but I didn't have it for my Brits, because I did print myself a Studebaker, on like a Lend-Lease Studebaker from the Americans, but it printed awfully, and I ended up giving that away to someone in my local group who also wanted a truck, and I was just like, I don't like it, you have it. And they still use it. I've seen them at least twice since then, actually using that model. Want, yes, that truck is what I want to. Yeah, good. That makes more sense. I think that's what you... So, I need to properly read this because I might be reading this wrong. So the distance between two different units is always measured between the bases of the closest models in the units. Follow the same guideline above for models without a base. Does this mean... Because the way we've been doing it in 2nd edition is we measure from the closest enemy model, but to each individual model. So if this guy's got a rifle and this guy's got a rifle, they're at point blank range, so they're getting the +1 for being within 6. This guy's not, because this guy's 8 inches away. So he will be rolling a different roll to hit than this one. But if this rule here is reading, if I'm reading it correctly, the distance between two different units is always measured between the closest models in the units. So what that means is if this one is within 6 inches, then the whole unit is now getting the point blank, or I'm not sure if point blank is still in the game, but whatever range bonus and penalty for the closest model is what the whole unit gets. And so we're not splitting up by different distances. Quite clearly says that. We'll check on that as we go through. This is my first time reading the rulebook, and I've tried to keep out of seeing a lot of the stuff that's been floating around online, because just hype trains annoy me. And so, yeah, I probably could have kept up to date with a little bit here or there. No measuring before deciding down here. I've gone both ways on this, because allowing and not allowing pre-measuring has the same effect, which is odd. The idea is that a player who if you can pre-measure, a player who's indecisive is going to measure everything and go, oh, distance to that, distance to that, and I want to work something out and plan things out, and it takes forever, and it slows the game down. On the other hand, if you don't allow pre-measuring, like we are here, the same kind of player is going to be like, oh, I'm not sure about that, and I'm not sure about that, and I'm not sure about that, and I haven't really, maybe I'm in range, or maybe I'm not in range, or maybe I'm too far away. And so you still get that indecisiveness, you still get that slow play from certain players. And so I go back and forth between pre-measuring and not. A lot of the time I'll allow a new player to pre-measure, particularly if it's a practice game, just so that they get in the hang of things. Like a lot of us that have been playing for a long time, we can just see, that's a 12-inch charge, I can make that, that's easy. But someone who isn't familiar with wargaming particularly, or measuring in old-fashioned, out-of-date units of distance like inches, might not be able to guess that. But that's still the same between second and third, so that's not changing. Right, let's look at line of sights. So, to determine what a model can see, lean down and look at the model to get a soldier's eye view of the battlefield. That's always good fun. So, line of sight ignores friendly infantry. Does that mean we can shoot over friendly infantry now? If need be, you can gently lie down to friendly models or remove them to work out your line of sight. Yes, that's... Practically, you never really need to do that. Vehicles and terrain will block line of sight. And, yeah, we'll look at terrain later on. So that is something that we do need to double check on. Does that mean, because in second edition you can't shoot through friendly infantry, and you can't shoot within an inch of a friendly vehicle if that weapon can hurt the vehicle, but in this it seems like you can shoot past friendly infantry because they're all lying down and shooting over their heads. We shall see if that is clarified. So we have higher, I've noticed that a lot of people are not playing with hills anymore. Oh, I'm actually out of frame. Let's bring that in. Hill. A lot of players, a lot of wargamers, and I see this in different game systems as well, we're really not using hills very much. My local gaming group, I think the only elevation we have is inside buildings. I don't think we have any hills that I can think of. And the 40k group that plays at the same shop is the same. There's no, from what I've seen, there are buildings with multiple stories, but there's no hills. Is that just a thing that we've collectively decided on, that hills are kind of more trouble than they're worth? That's a shame. I didn't really think about that before starting the stream. But yeah, we don't do hills in wargaming anymore. Okay, table boundaries, dice rerolls, second score must use even if it's worse, and you can never reroll. Reroll, pretty standard stuff for rerolling. Oh, look at that. That's a cool picture. The glow around all the muzzle flashes. Oh, what about the hill your mouse got stuck out in the last game? Yes, actually, that is true. That's a big pile of rocks that would be a hill. So yes, we have at least that. But that one piece of terrain is from a different set than anything else. And I think it's the only one we have. There might be more that I'm just not thinking of. Or maybe we just don't use them that much. Because that's a vacuum formed, like, hollow sheet that's in a dome shape. I'm remembering from 20 years ago when I was fairly new to wargaming. We loved hills. We spent all of our time making hills because you pile up books. Like you put a sheet out, like a fabric sheet for your battle mat, and then you put some books underneath it to raise it up to make a hill. Or you'd make polystyrene, like in shelves, like a ziggurat hill, so that you can actually put models on flat surfaces. And we had all of these other types of kind of just sloped hills where models would fall off. We went through so many different types of hills. But yeah, there may still be some hills around, but just not as much as they used to be. So infantry types or unit types is infantry, artillery, and vehicles. That doesn't seem to have anything new in it. Bicycles, motorcycles, and even horses count as infantry in most cases, as they usually will fight on foot, so even that is the same. We actually have it repeated here. Models and bases. Sometimes a support weapon or artillery piece can be mounted on a single larger base. This is fine. This music is really... let's skip to the next track because that's distracting. Sometimes a support weapon or artillery piece can be mounted on a single large base. This is fine. Imagine that each soldier crewing the weapon is mounted on a 25 round base or 25 by 50 prone. So that's a repeat of what we saw a few pages ago, but the same as second edition. Definitely a rule I like. Formation. So unit coherency is still 1 inch. If an individual should become separated from a unit, then this must be corrected whenever the unit is moved again. It doesn't say that you have to move, which I think it does in second edition. It just says that you have to correct the unit coherency the next time, whenever the unit is moved again. So can you make a fire order if you're out of unit coherency? Obviously in advance or a run, you'd have to move back into coherency. But on a down or any of the other, like a fire order particularly, interesting. We'll have to come back to that one as well. So we've got the 1 inch gap. Yep, so each model within a unit has to be within an inch of every other model in the unit or any other model in the unit. And then they have to be 1 inch, at least 1 inch away from even friendly other units so that you don't get confused between which is which. The amount of times that I've picked up an officer and moved them along with an infantry squad and then wonder, where's my officer gone? I did that. I think I did that in the last game. No, because that was my Americans. I did it with my... I did it with my Americans. I moved my LT with an infantry squad, and then it's like, oh, I've got an extra order die at the end of the turn. Where's my officer? Where's my officer? Oh, he's tagged along in that squad. Here's something interesting. And under preparing to play, we're now on page 66. And we're talking about orders. Reference. So in second edition, in the rulebook, it says if you don't have the official order dice, you can still randomly select units by using plastic chits. It specifically says plastic chits. And everyone knows that means tiddlywinks. Whereas in here, that word there that you can just about see fluffily in my low quality camera is the word tiddlywink. So tiddlywinks have specifically been named. But yeah, if you don't have the appropriate number of order dice, you can just use tiddlywinks or something similar, so long as they're the same shape and size and feel, so that you can randomly select between them. I have seen people playing with playing cards. You just have like one player plays like a black suit, one player plays a red suit. You have the same number of cards as you have units, shuffle them together, and just draw as you play, and each unit gets to go. Mohammed, hi, how you doing? BoltAction is played in turns. Draw a die from the bag, choose a unit to go, order test if necessary, yep, and then back, yep. So turn sequences seems to be the same. Once the unit is destroyed, it gets removed from their order dice gets removed from the bag. So that's interesting. We specifically have here at the beginning of the rule. We're basically still at the beginning of the rule section. That the game is played with 6 turns, and on a 4+, it's 7 turns. Usually that kind of thing changes depending on the mission. So you might have a mission that's 5 turns, you might have 6 turns, or you might have 6 and a 50% for a 7th turn. Or there are certain mission types that take longer, so you'd have 7, 8 turns. Whereas this is setting a standard of 6 with a 50% for a 7th turn for all game modes. And I'm assuming there's probably some mission objectives or mission rules that will change that. But it's just interesting that that's a base rule rather than a like per mission rule. So orders, same as version 2. Ooh, interesting. So on a rally, the unit does not move or fire. Instead, the troops pause for breath and patch up the wounded, pass the ammo. See pinned below. I just noticed here, it says lose all pin markers. Which is that can be a lot. There, what was it in second? It's D6+1, so you can potentially only get rid of 2 pins on a successful rally. Otherwise, they do seem to be... run is double speed without firing. Yeah, so everything else seems to be fine. It's just that the way that rally works is slightly different. In the case that some particularly heavy weapons, 2 or more pin markers can sometimes be scored. Artillery barrage, hammer general fire a single unit. Yeah, that seems to be the same as version 2 then. So a single unit will, no matter how many weapons they're firing, a single unit causes 1 pin if they hit with anything, unless it's a heavy weapon like basically HE. Hi Raynick. I think you lose all pins if you stay down at the end of the turn too. Oh, wow, that's a bigger change, because that was only D3. One of them was D3, I'm sure of it. Yeah, so that means clearing pins is going to be a lot easier now. Although you're still sacrificing a turns, like they just on a rally they just stand around, and on a down order they're at least getting the +2. It's not a -2 to hit, it's +2 cover save, because I know shooting's going to be working differently. They changed it to make it more like a worse game. I like this. Mention here, instead of cluttering a gaming table with pin markers, whilst they've got a picture of a game, just lots and lots of cotton wool all over this. That looks kind of cool. It's just funny how that's right there next to that rule. I'm reminded here. So this is saying that you can, instead of putting a physical thing on the table next to the model, we usually use D6. I think a lot of people use D6 for keeping track of pins. It says here that you can keep track of it on a piece of paper and say, like, this unit's got this many pins, which just reminds me of naval games. Battlefield Gothic, Armada, Kings of War Armada, also Star Wars Armada to an extent. You have the model is on the board, but then you have this booklet of information about all your ships and what condition they're in and how much damage you've taken and which part of the ship is on fire. I strangely quite enjoy that kind of thing in naval games. Like Battlefield Gothic is one of my favourite tabletop games of all time. So morale is going to be reduced by 1 per pin. That's the same. And it's also -1. It's being a bit cagey about how it's describing it here. It does affect shooting, but it's not saying how. Well, I guess we'll read that later. So it looks like order testing has worked in the same way. 6 gives you a foobar. Yep, so Incredible Courage is still here. So 1. So if you roll a 1 Snake Eyes, then not only is the order automatically given, but the unit also immediately loses all pin markers rather than just 1. I can't remember what the old exceptional Incredible Courage was. I think it might have also been a D6. But again, it's now all pins are gone. So we're seeing a lot of ways to get rid of a lot of pins very quickly, which will prevent, every now and again, it's not going to have a massive change, but every now and again it's going to keep a few units from getting bogged down. Which is kind of the point of BoltAction to an extent, or as much as that is an annoying part of it, having units bogged down and how you deal with that is kind of part of the game in 2nd edition, certainly. And it's just going to be a little bit easier in 3rd. Does that mean that the game will play a little faster? Well, we've got a lot more units. The average game has gone up by 1/4. At full strength. So an infantry squad at full strength you can re-roll an order test if you're full size still. That's the same, I believe. That's one of those rules that I vaguely knew about but never actually used because I always forgot about it. I like the description of Fubar and Snafu. Fouled up beyond all recognition, and situation normal, all fouled up. That's quite a deliberate typo there, but we'll let them have it in polite conversation. And yeah, so on a 6 you get the Fubar table. Is the Fubar table in the back? It should be. It is. So that's a quick and easy one to get at. Panic. So on a panic, so 4+, you make a run move towards the closest table edge. Oh, and you are destroyed if you actually reach the table edge. Amazing. Or you go down. And then friendly fire seems to work as before. Hang on. No, it doesn't. Place a fire order by the unit. The opposing player controls the firing unit as if it were one of their own, except that the chosen target must have an enemy unit within 12 inches. Proximity to the enemy is what caused the friendly fire incident. Oh, okay. That makes friendly fire a lot less of a problem than it has been. Because the unit that gets fired upon by the foobar, the other unit who's rolled the foobar, that target unit has to be close to the enemy. It makes sense, like the way it's described here. Thematically, that makes a lot of sense. And it does reduce the occasions where foobar will actually be used. Interesting. I think I approve of that. Although, every time foobar happens, it doesn't happen very often, but every time it happens, it's always good fun. And I don't want it to go away, and this just makes it, it's just going to happen less often. Okay, so leadership values, inexperienced, regular, and veteran are the same. -1 for a team leader. Ah, so they've changed the terminology here, because this used to be NCO, non-commissioned officer. But they're actually, they do mention NCOs here, but the actual rule is squad leader or team leader. Does that mean that teams... Yeah, the same is true for infantry weapon teams and artillery crews. The same is true for HQ units. If the officer is killed, the men will suffer the same permanent penalty, -1. So do all weapons teams now have a team leader? How does that count for 2 model weapons teams? Does the gunner or the loader count as the leader? If you shoot the loader, are they now at -1 leadership for having lost their leader? And also -1 for being, or -1 to hit for not having the loader. Interesting. We will need to clarify this. So yeah, once you hit 0 leadership because of pins, you are removed from the board. That's the same. You can never have a leadership outside of 2 to 11, which is a massive range actually. Retaining orders at the end of a turn. Can we still set off an ambush? We can. So a unit on ambush can retain their ambush for the next turn, and their die stays with them rather than going back in the bag. Or they can attempt on a 4+, and if they fail, the die goes back into the bag. So that's the same as second. And a down can retain that. A pinned unit that does this also loses all pins. So that's what Renick said earlier. If you keep a down order, you get rid of all of your pins, which can be very useful. That can be very annoying as well. A tiny veteran unit in heavy cover down, very hard to shift, and so when you eventually stack up enough pins for them to run away, it can be quite a relief. But if they're staying down and clearing all their pins, it just makes them really hard to get rid of. Movement. Another cool... I like the artwork in this. A lot of it seems familiar, particularly the photograph seems very familiar. I suspect that a lot of the model photographs are just the ones off of their website, like the sales website. But some of the full page artwork, I don't recognise it. I haven't necessarily seen it before. But charging Japanese there. Hang on. Have we seen... Give me a moment. I'm just checking something. Nope. There's lots of pictures of models. Lots of pictures of vehicle models. pictures of artillery guns. Oh, that's the LEFH 18. I have that model. I did a video on that recently. There's some cavalry. There's a whole army's worth of models. There is some artwork as well, the drawn stuff. But what there isn't, let me grab the second edition rulebook just to make sure I'm not imagining things. The first page I open, that is a picture of a most likely deactivated Sten gun. There is an MG34, sorry, MG42. So there's a lot of pictures of models in the old rulebook, and there's a lot of the artwork as well, which is quite good. But there are, oh, there was another one in there. Well, there wasn't there? Nope, nope. Nope, I imagined it. But there were a couple. Okay, maybe there aren't as many as I was thinking. Yeah, okay, so there's not as many as I was thinking, but there are some pictures. That is DP-28, light machine gun from the Soviet Union. There are pictures of firearms. Oh, there's a Thompson there. In the second edition rulebook. There does not appear to be any. There weren't as many as I thought there was. I thought there were quite a few. But there don't seem to be any in the third edition rulebook. And we may just have to keep our eye out for that as we go through. Because, like I said, there weren't as many as I thought in the second edition book. There were at least 4 that we found just by flicking through there, and couldn't see any flicking through the third. So maybe there are, maybe there aren't. Don't know what that says. I don't know if that's important or relevant in this latest bit. Right, the movement. I think a lot of the movement is very similar, if not the same. Keep units away from each other, keep units close to each other, close to themselves. 1 inch and 1 inch. 6 inch for a normal move, 12 inch for a run. Unit of infantry moves, they allow models to move through the positions of other units, as long as they just end up more than an inch away at the end of their movement. We don't allow tanks or other vehicles to move through friends, or to be moved through by friends. Vehicles must negotiate their way around friends. That has changed. So in second, you can drive a vehicle through a friendly infantry squad and assume that the infantry will get out of the way and then take their positions up after the vehicle's gone. Now, infantry are blocking even friendly vehicles' movement. So that's going to make movement a bit more kind of, you have to plan things out where you put your infantry. The amount of times that my free rifle squad has ended up in front of my Ziz 3 and ended up going down turn after turn after turn, blocking its line of sight. But now it's going to same thing's going to happen with all my vehicles. They're going to get penned in by the infantry that are going down on the road. Thanks, guys. Terrain seems to be... Okay, buildings get their own section as they used to. Have a table for movement. Let us take a break to have a drink. So, road. Only wheeled vehicles are getting... So, wheeled vehicles and half tracks will rapidly move along roads. And this is 2 times speed. Does that count for bicycles still? Does that count for motorcycles? Are there any other examples? Basically, tracked vehicles are not able to move double speed on roads anymore. think that's going to be the only change. So infantry can't run through rough ground or obstacles, which makes sense. Infantry can run in buildings. So artillery are going to get stuck in terrain as normal. Artillery can be deployed in terrain as for 2nd edition. I probably could just find the same table in the 2nd edition rulebook and compare. Is it in the back of the book? That would be helpful. It is. So tracked, wheeled, artillery and infantry, open, rough, obstacle, building, the road. So it is the same table, the same layout, and it seems like everything else is the same. Yeah. Can you spot any differences in this terrible quality camera? Yeah, so it looks like it's just tracked vehicles are losing the double speed on roads, but wheeled and half tracks are maintaining that. Does mean things like obstacles. We'll discuss this in our local group, but our walls and barrels and similar things that we've got to break up line of sight a little bit and to provide cover on the move, we'll be classifying those as obstacles. That's fine. Shooting. Pick a unit to shoot at. Yeah, fine. Intervening friends means you cannot shoot through them. So what we saw earlier was something that suggested you might be able to, but this is specifying that you cannot shoot through friendly infantry, as the same with second. And I'm pretty sure this, again, we talk about hills. If you draw a line and you have an inch, that's being measured from the bottom, from the base. So that's assuming a model is an inch tall, even though they're 28mm usually. 28 to the eyes, 32 to the top of the head. So same thing's happening with vehicles. So if your weapon can't actually hurt the vehicle, you can shoot right up against it, but the vehicle itself will directly block line of sight. Whereas the infantry, you need a 1-inch clearance gap, otherwise it's going to block line of sight. You can't shoot near a friendly infantry. Target reactions. This is the one thing that I wanted from BoltAction 3rd, is more reactions. Because in 2nd we had infantry could go down and certain recce vehicles could make an escape move. Other than that, I think that was it. But in Conflict 47, there's a lot more interesting reactions. The one that I always remember is firefight. So if you shoot at a unit, that unit can react by shooting at you first. Or I think the shots are counted as simultaneous, but I want that particularly. I want the firefight reaction, just because that's fun and also thematic. So this is another something that we mentioned at the beginning. Measure the distance between each firing model and the closest visible enemy model in the target unit. Then compare the range of each soldier's weapon with the measured range to the target model. Roll a d6 for each shot, so on. That's then the same as how we were doing it in second edition. So it mentioned at the beginning that you measure the distance between units from the closest model to the closest model, but when you're shooting, each model is measuring its own range, but it's measuring to the closest enemy model, but you're measuring from each friendly model as they're shooting, which is the same as in second. Each d6 roll. So, yeah, we've gone from a 3+ standard to a 4+ standard, but there's a lot less modifiers. Inexperienced is -1. Pinned, I think, is per pin. -1 per pin. Oh, no. No, it isn't. If the shooters are pinned down, they will be more concerned about keeping a low profile than aiming carefully. If the firing unit currently has one or more pin markers, the firer suffers -1 to hit. So that's a -1 no matter how many pins, rather than -1 per pin. Still -1 for firing on an advanced move. We'll have to see when we come to weapons teams and artillery whether the pivot still counts as an advance. Please, can we have hand grenades in the game? We've got hand grenades in the hand grenades we have at home. So point blank range. If target is within 6 inches, you get +2 to hit. It was +1 previously, so it's now +2 to hit. And the rule here is hand grenade range. So yeah, stop whinging about hand grenades. Hand grenades are in the game; they always have been. So +2 to hit at point blank. There's nothing for range. There's no range modifier, so there's no long range. Huh. Yeah, so measuring from each friendly model is just to see whether they're in range or not to see whether they're within long range or short range. Okay, that's just a thing that's going away. Because this is going from a 3 to a 4, the base roll is going from a 3 to a 4. Having a lot of the stuff taken out means that we might end up having the same roll to hit. Maybe. High impossible shots, or nigh impossible shots. Roll a 6 and then another 6, so exploding 6s as it was before. Yeah, we know about pins. Roll 2 damage. Inex is 3, regulars 4, veteran is 5, soft skins 6, carrier, light, medium, heavy tanks. Yeah, so all of the damage values are the same. Damage value makes a distinction between troops and soft skin vehicles, which have a damage value of up to 6, and armoured targets of 7 or more. Yep. So we know that we also know that heavy machine guns, it mentions heavy machine guns here, they're getting 6 shots now. So 6 shots, and all of them are having +1 on the casualty roll. Heavy machine guns are the new anti-infantry weapon. Although, on vehicles, aren't they halving the number of shots? So they'd still be 3. But also medium machine guns are also 3. Are light machine guns 2 now? On like a vehicle-mounted light machine gun. I assume that's when we get to vehicles because we didn't see it already. And then cover saves, the thing we didn't want. So soft cover is a 5+ and hard cover is a 4+. And down is a +2 modifier. So a unit in cover is a 2+ save. Heavy cover and down is 2+ save. And that's not affected by the damage anymore. Yuck. So the to hit roll is probably about the same. The damage roll is probably about the same, in fact very similar. But now that there's this additional step of cover saves, it's actually meaning that shooting is going to be a lot less effective, especially for units in cover. There's a few things that have happened so far that I'm thinking that it's going to speed up gameplay. This is going to slow it down a lot. And especially when a unit's in cover and it's those early turns, turn 2, turn 3, when you're kind of just getting into position, you're taking those long range shots. And usually you'd be 6s on 6s to hit. You're more likely to get hits because we don't have the range penalty anymore. But now they're getting a 2+, or at least a 5 or 4+ saving throw, in addition to basically being about the same damage roll. I think overall it seems like this is going to make infantry, particularly infantry in terrain, much harder to get rid of. Yeah, so going down doesn't make you harder to hit, but it does mean that you get 5+ cover save if you're not in terrain, +2 to whatever your cover save if you were in terrain. That means that pins are going to be more likely because you're more likely to get hit in the first place, which means the pin, but less likely to actually do any damage because of the cover save. But then we're also clearing pins more quickly for various reasons. I think some of this is just changes for the sake of changes. I haven't played a game of this yet, so I don't know. Can't say yet, but it does seem a bit of a muchness. Just changing things to mirror worse games with the cover save. Target units in cover. So 50% of its models are inside a dense terrain. If less than 50% of the shooters in a firing unit can draw a clear line of sight to at least 50% of the way that some of this is written. Yuck. If less than 50% of the shooters in the firing unit can draw a clear line of sight to at least 50% of the models in the target unit, then the target unit is in cover. Why do you have to write it like that? Why? I mean, it's odd. It just incredible specificity and legalese kind of stuff that I don't like in rulebooks. I like the old-fashioned rulebooks from like 30 years ago where it was all like nice and friendly and wishy-washy and you just make stuff up as you go. It's fine. It's fine. We had loads of fun back then. But it does seem to be essentially the same. I don't see any difference there to how we've been playing it in second. What's kept behind a wall when they touch it? Ah. So... if you're within 1 inch of dense terrain, you're not... Firing models A, B, and C are at the edge of the dense terrain, as the majority of the firing unit is not. So if you're in terrain by more than 1 inch, the enemy that's out in the open that you're shooting at get a cover save. That is different to how we've been doing it, although I think that is very similar to the way that 2nd edition is supposed to be played. We just have, at our local group, we have a slightly different way of doing area terrain, like trees. But that does mean that if you're in a piece of terrain, like well within a piece of terrain, shooting out of that terrain gives your enemy cover. And so you have to move up to the edge of it within 1 inch of the edge. So this unit in cover, shooting at them, because they're not close to the edge. 3 of them are, but the rest of them aren't. Can't really see on this camera view which bits are... Basically the dark rings, those are the bases of the models. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the models are well within this piece of terrain. 3 of the models, 1, 2, and 3, are within 1 inch of the terrain. So more of the unit is deep in the terrain than at the edge, which means when they shoot at this unit is going to get cover from the terrain that these guys are in, because this guy's shooting through all of these trees to get to that shot. That's the implication of that. However, if you had positioned these so that they're all within 1 inch of the edge, then this unit would not be getting cover. That's what that means. I think it used to be 3 inches. Essentially, the rule was the same, but it used to be 3 inches. I might be wrong on that. That does sound familiar. That is how... That is a similar... Like, the method is familiar, even if 1 inch is maybe a bit closer than I'm used to. And if you're not sure, assume they're in cover. That's what that says there. If you're not sure, assume the target unit is in cover, because... Good grief. Ah! I love some of the really silly SPGs that various nations created. Like, you take a little light tank hull that's not really useful as a main tank anymore, and you put the biggest artillery piece that you can on it, and then you build a humongous armoured box around that to protect it. So absurd. I love it. KV2. And, oh, what's the one that Bovington's got? The FE4000? FE4005? Something like that. I'm misremembering that name. Casualties can be taken from any models in the target unit, even if it temporarily breaks formation, including models that are completely out of line of sight and range of an enemy's weapons. Think of it as a dynamic situation where soldiers are moving around and bullets travel further than their in-game ranges and punch through or ricochet off cover. So that lets you put a light machine gunner on a corner and the rest of the squad around behind the wall, and just as the light machine gunner gets shot, everyone else dies, and the light machine gunner's fine. That's fairly common. I don't think there's that much cheese, that type of cheese at my local group, but it does happen every now and again. A unit bunched up just so that the light machine gun can shoot. Although they usually don't stay there for very long, because it's the type of thing where This is this is just in between where they come from, where they're going. Bovington have an FV 4005. So I was close. Did I say, what did I say? I can't remember what I said now. But yeah, that's the vehicle I'm thinking of. That was a testbed vehicle, wasn't it? Though it wasn't even a prototype technically. They were just testing the concept of putting that big an artillery piece on a tank chassis. Everyone have a drink. If a target loses half or more of its models from fire from a single enemy unit, take a morale check. And if failed, then you, remove from the board. So that's the same. Here's something that we had to argue about in second edition. Resolving an ambush. Units that are in ambush can interrupt any move made by an enemy unit to shoot at it. The ambush can interrupt at any point during the move, as long as they can see the target at that point, before, during, or as soon as movement is complete. The player whose units are in ambush declares when they want the targets to fire. Blah, blah, blah. The target cannot react by going down, because at this point they already have their order, so they can't go down. Note that a unit can spring an ambush against units that are making any kind of move, advance, run, escape, or even units regrouping after an assault. So that is the same as second edition, but that's something that we actually were doing wrong for a while. You cannot react, you cannot set off an ambush to a unit shooting on a fire order. It has to be the movement of an advance order, but it can be any movement, including consolidating after a close combat. And there's mention here, enemy assaulting, you can't react fire on with the enemy are within 6 inches when they start to charge. You can if the unit is on ambush. Well, it wouldn't be a react fire, it would be setting off the ambush. But I don't know why you would go into ambush if there's a unit within 6 inches of you. Wouldn't you just shoot them first? Dunno. Seems like a thing I'd do. Unless they were partially in cover within 6 inches of you, and then when they move they'd be out of cover technically, so they wouldn't get the cover bonus. Maybe. Very situational. I like that picture. God, that camera's rubbish. Even that is not an amazing camera. I'm a professional YouTuber now. Allegedly. Yep, that's... Aha! Guns! Rifle, 12 inches, 1 shot. Pistol, 6 inches, 1 shot. Submachine gun, 12 inches, 2 shots. Assault. Pistols don't have assault anymore. Interesting. That means that pistols... The only advantage that a medic ever got was the assault when they were defending themselves. The tough fighters when they were defending themselves. Assault rifles and submachine guns are still going. I notice here that automatic rifle has been moved to the main weapons table, which is good. That's a useful place for it. Pretty much only the Americans are using it, but it does show up every now and again. I would like to see the Soviet SVT and the German Gewehr 43 actually listed as auto rifles. But the thing that isn't here, that really should also be here, if you're going to move automatic rifle to the main weapons list, move shotguns to the main weapon list, because I don't see shotguns here. Where's my shotgun? Shotguns were also not widely used. Certainly less so than the automatic rifles were. But please. Yeah, I might take that back about the SVT and the Gewehr 43. They're more similar to the M1 Garand rather than the BAR. Yeah, I take that back. So, light machine gun, 4-shot and team. Medium machine gun, 6 shots, team and fixed. So that's an additional shot for the medium. Otherwise, they're the same. The heavy machine gun going up to 6 shots and 48-inch range. Weren't they 36 before? Or were they always 48? Team fixed, 1 pen. Autocannon, heavy autocannon. Oh, heavy autocannon's got way more range. 72-inch range. Although there's no long range modifier, so that's kind of, once the weapons hit 48-inch range, you're usually in range most of the time. It's only when you're firing diagonally across the board that you ever need more than that. Piat is +5 with shape charge. Bazooka is also +5 shape charge. Let me just double check that, because I swear that used to be +6. Just flicking through my 2nd edition rulebook. Nope, Piat and Bazooka is 5, Panzerschreck and Panzerfaust is 6. So that is the same, actually. Light AT gun, 4, 5 and 6 for medium and heavy, 7 for, yeah. Flamethrowers. Mortars seem the same. 1, 2 and 3 inch blast for the mortars, 2, 3 and 4 for light, medium, heavy howitzer. That all seems the same. Going to start skipping through some stuff unless anyone has anything that they know about weapons that have changed. Because everything, I don't think I've seen anything that's changing about, like, other than the to hit rolls and the cover saves. The actual weapons themselves aren't really changing that much. This is the descriptors. Assault weapons suffer no penalty to hit when moving, and they count as tough fighters, so that seems to be the same. We'll have to see what tough fighters does, if that changes things. All anti-tank guns, including mounted on vehicle, get an addition. Oh! All anti-tank guns, from light to super heavy, including those mounted on vehicles, get a +1 to hit vehicles when shooting at with a fire order. Ah! Anti-tank guns are better. Cool. So a vehicle, so a standard tank with an anti-tank gun and a machine gun. The machine guns have gotten worse because it's halving the number of shots. The anti-tank gun has got better because it's getting +1 to hit. Given that there are going to be more vehicles on the table, making anti-tank guns that little bit better is probably just going to balance things out again. It's going back to that thing I was talking about earlier, is that some things make the game take longer and some things make the game a little quicker. And overall, I don't know what the balance is. Interesting. I don't know. I don't know. It's just going to have to sit down and play this at some point. Or stand around a table and play this at some point. So fixed weapons have a... Don't describe it like that. Fixed weapons can only target an enemy that lies partially within their front arc, i.e. at an angle 45 degrees to each side of their barrel, as shown. That is a 90-degree fire arc, not 245. I know that the middle of that is where the barrel is, but describing that as a 45 degrees is going to confuse people. That is a 90-degree fire arc. I'll put that, line it up with the corner of the camera. There. It is a 90-degree fire arc, centered on the gun's barrel. Yeah, so it's -1 to hit on an advance order for turning the gun as well. So that's the same as before. Oh, flamethrowers. I've been told that flamethrowers are different. Hits from flamethrowers allow no cover save, so that's a big... It's just removing the worst step of shooting. This makes flamethrowers especially effective in bunkers, as well as troops being down. Of course, because down is now a cover save modifier, not a hit modifier, so flamethrowers are going to ignore that as well. Shooting a flamethrower, roll a single dice hit first, but if you score a hit, it is turned into D6 or D6 plus 1 for vehicles, so that's the same. Yeah, there's so many people coming over from 40k, because 40k has a system for both for blast weapons and flame type weapons, where you work out the number of shots first, and then you roll each of those shots separately, which means you're more likely to get some number of hits. Whereas in BoltAction, you roll to hit first with 1 die and then roll the number of hits afterwards. And so it's all or nothing with BoltAction. You either get all the hits or none of them, whereas in 40k, it's more there's more range where you can get a few hits. And you're more likely to get a middle range, whereas in BoltAction, you get all or nothing. Flamers always hit the top armor of vehicles. They don't suffer -1 pen for long range. So flamethrowers aren't suffering -1 for shooting, -1 to hit at long range, because no one's getting -1 to hit for long range, because long range doesn't exist anymore. But velocity-based armor-piercing weapons, so AP rounds, anti-tank guns, are getting -1 penetration at long range, but the flamethrower and I assume shape charge don't. So that means that the flamethrower's range has gone from 3 inches to 6 inches, where it should be. Although, if you've actually seen infantry flamethrowers, like, go and look at some archive footage of them shooting. They have a lot more range than you think they do. Ian McCollum from Forgotten Weapons did a video where he used some historical and reproduction flamethrowers as well. And yeah, 100 meters with an infantry flamethrower is possible. I think that's probably the top end of it, but it's kind of 50 to 100 meters is what you're looking at. So flamethrower is doing D3 plus 1 pins, as I think that's the same as it was before. A unit hit by a flamethrower must check its morale. Oh no. After shooting in with an infantry man-pack flamethrower, roll a D6. On the roll of 1 or 2, the flamethrower has run out of fuel. That's twice as likely. So you've gone from a 1 in 6 to a 1 in 3 chance of running out of flamethrower fuel. That makes flamethrowers replace the model with an unarmed model rather than removing them entirely. I saw there's a FAQ already out, and it says that unarmed models do fight in close combat now. So this model isn't gonna. Well, it doesn't have a weapon anymore. It doesn't have a pistol or rifle, but he sticks around and fights with sticks. He gets his bayonet out. Same vehicle flamethrowers is also 1 or a 2, runs out of fuel. Didn't I hear something about flamethrowers in close combat? We haven't got to the close combat rules, so it might be in there. Otherwise, that's the same. So it seems like flamethrowers are very much the same, except that they're running out of fuel on a 1 or a 2 rather than just a 1. And given that you can really easily have a lot more flamethrowers than you used to be able to, because it used to be you'd have 1 flamethrower team and then 1 engineer team, and 1 vehicle flamethrower if you really tried. Yeah, that's common. But now we've got engineering platoons, and you can have 2 flamethrower teams and 4 engineer squads with flamethrowers. So with them running out of fuel more often might not be enough, actually. We're still going to see a lot more flamethrowers, I think. Okay, now we're moving on to high explosive. If the target is an infantry or artillery unit, the weapon must fire HE. So we're not allowed to shoot AP at infantry anymore. Sadness. I want that +7 versus a veteran in heavy cover. Oh, actually, how does this work with cover? Oh, good lord, there's a lot of HE. 1 to 4 inch, yep. That is now a 3rd mention of the multi-base system. Hasn't actually changed from 2nd edition to 3rd, but it's just being mentioned more often to clarify it. So you have to, so whenever you're putting a HE blast template down, you have to hit as many models on the target unit first before you allow it to clip in a 2nd unit. I remember someone said that vehicle, if you're shooting at a vehicle, you have to actually put the center of the blast template on the vehicle. I'm not seeing that here yet. So going down halves the number of results as normal. Models hit get their saves as normal, including down. So it says here, take saves and then roll to damage as normal. Whereas in the rules for shooting, it said you roll to damage and then you roll saves afterwards. I'm sad that they're not ignoring cover, or at least reducing cover. It would be nice if a HE weapon, because it's kind of the point of HE is to blow people out of cover. HE shells don't rely on shells. Larger and more powerful shells have a high value. This is shown on the table below. Above. If the shell... HE shells don't rely on the kinetic energy of the shell to penetrate target's armor, so they don't suffer -1 pen when firing at long range, nor the +1 pen for point blank range. Oh, we're getting +1 pen for point blank range? I missed that. Does that count for everything, or is that only anti-tank weapons? That's another thing to come back to. I should be taking notes of all the things I want to come back to. It still doesn't say that you have to center the blast template on a vehicle if you're shooting at a vehicle, so I'm going to assume that that is not required. And models can be removed from anywhere, not just under the blast radius. That prevents you from specifically targeting light machine gunners or squad leaders. Hits versus buildings seems the same. Oh, hello. Multiple HE shots have changed a lot. Oh man, the whirlwind. The whirlwind is going to be vicious. So in second edition, you would have to connect each of the 1-inch blast templates together in this like little chain, whereas now you place each of them separately and hit different models. And because, and as they've shown here, because a 1-inch template will always hit 2 models, because friendly models have to be within an inch within a unit, you're gonna get 2 hits per template that you put down. At least there are cases where you can get 3. I think you can probably get 4 if they're literally bundled on top of each other. But absolute minimum is 2 each, always. Which was very difficult to get with a whirlwind or she says flak filling up here. So they've got better. And also, yeah, the double, just a normal autocannon firing 2 shots, if you get those 2 hits, the first blast marker hits 2 models, and the second blast marker often doesn't hit anyone else. Sometimes you get a third, but often you just get the 2 that you were getting anyway. So multiple HE, particularly autocannons, improvement for them. Does make it a bit fiddly to, because you're going to be placing blast markers down everywhere, but then it was also fiddly beforehand with working out what shape your odd snake chain blast marker was. Howitzers getting indirect and direct fire as normal. Indirect, that seems to be all the same. Cannot be fired indirectly from ambush. Multiple mortars in a squad can fire at separate targets. So that Japanese Grenadier squad, I think they could split fire anyway in seconds. Spotters. A spotter is always a single unarmed model, and it's part of our mortar artillery unit. So they don't get a spare or a second order die, which makes sense. Ah, I think that's the same as before, but you can either give an order to the spotter or the crew, not both. We house ruled it that you can give a move order, and both the mortar team and the spotter can move at the same time. A spotter will always count as down. Yep, that's... the spotter's essentially the same. Ah, multiple launchers. Yes, let's have some fun with multiple launchers. A multiple launcher counts as a heavy mortar, but its chance of hitting never gets better than 6. However, every time you fire it, pick the first target unit as normal and check which other enemy units are within 6 inches of the original template. So that's a heavy mortar's 3-inch template. So that's 1.5 inches. So 7.5 inch circle. If you find that there are friendly units within 6 inches of the original template, you cannot fire at all and the shot is wasted. Once the target units have been determined, the unit firing the multiple launcher, infantry or vehicle, receives 1 pin marker whether they hit or miss the target. This represents the extensive time needed to reload these destructive weapons, as well as the choking smoke released from the exhaust fumes of the salvo of large rockets. So there were certain multiple launchers that had that rule, that they'd get a pin, or some of them would get D3 pins. Usually the heavy multiple launchers, not the standard ones. But now all multiple launchers are getting 1 pin. Again, probably to address the complaints of how overpowered and game-breaking they are. And every time I've used them, they have not been particularly... I mean, they've been useful here and there. It's certainly a unit that I would take, just not game-breakingly powerful. One-shot weapons... seems to be fine. Shape charge... seems to be the same. Team weapons... yeah, that seems to be the same. What is this squad equipped with? German Afrika Korps squad. Doesn't say what type of squad. But they've got a light mortar, Panzerbücher, anti-tank rifle, and MG, that's 34. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rifles and a submachine gun. I think this is just a collection of models. I don't think you can field a unit that way. Rainick says they have changed that already. All multi-rocket launchers we get. Has there already been an errata? I know there's been an FAQ, but has there been an errata changing the rule? Is my book that I just bought today already out of date? Really? D3 pins is excessive. Because getting 3 pins forces you to... even 2 pins, you'd be probably taking a rally order the next turn. But then it's much easier to get rid of loads of pins. Rally order gets rid of all of them, not just a D6. But that still means you have to take the rally order. Team. There's a rule here that support team weapons, and it's just describing team weapons. Sometimes a team weapon and its crew might be mounted on a single base for each. Yeah. Team weapon shoots at full effectiveness as long as there are at least 2 members. Minimum of 2 crews always need to fire at full effect. That's the same as always. Most common team weapon carried in the typical infantry squad is light machine gun, brain gun and loader. That's, yep, standard. Loader still has to be within an inch. And the loader doesn't fire. Yep, so that's all the same. Where's this change to the MRL pins? Is there an errata already? Because if there's more stuff in there, I need to learn that as well. Given that I am officially helping out with the local gaming group and getting everyone learning the new rules. Which I'm not going to do in this live stream, but I do need to get reading that. I've got all of the Minor Nation PDFs as well. Should have somewhere in the back of the book. Yeah, here we go. There's the army lists for the main 5. So, close quarters. I've been told reliably by the angry internet that close quarters is not worth doing anymore. So let's read the extensive rules there are on it and see if we come to the same conclusion. Player wishes to charge an enemy at close quarters, make a run order, declare the target, move measure, target reacts, move the models. So it seems like that's the same as before. So a react fire is based on where the unit starts, not like an ambush where you can choose at any point. Yep, there's an errata. Should be the same place as the Minor Nations PDFs. Okay, I will have to go and look that up when the stream is over. Thank you for letting me know. That's just annoying. That's just. Like, you just spent all of this time and the last year advertising this book to me, and you got it wrong, and you've had to fix it on day 1. Come on, Warlord, you're better than this. Apparently that's the industry standard, though, as set by a certain other company that makes all of their books obsolete after 3 weeks. Yeah, so moving seems to be the same. Do you... I'm not seeing it here. Oh, it'll be here, won't it? What? That is oddly written. So if the distance is greater than the maximum run move of the assaulting troops, which is 12 or 6 depending on terrain, then the assault is failed. Move the assaulting unit as far towards the target as it can get, remembering to leave a gap of more than 1 inch between them as usual. If it was less than an inch, then it would be successful. Or if that's just if it happens to be within that last inch. I assume that must be like the last mile, the last inch kind of situation. So in second edition, if any model in a unit got in close combat, then all of them would move up into close combat distance. It's not specifying that in this. It seems to be the same. The way it's written seems to imply that, but it's not stating outright that that is the case. Attacking and defending models that are unable to move into contact with the enemy for whatever reason are positioned so that they touch the models in their own unit that are in contact with the enemy, and so on. These models then count as fighting in combat even if they are not in base contact with enemies. Okay. So, effectively it's the same, but their movement isn't necessarily... they're not necessarily bunching up physically as they used to, but they are... Thank you, Paul, for the link. That's the Warlord community. Probably the downloads for that errata. And I think because you're a mod on my stream that everyone can see that. So the target reaction here, if the assault is determined to be successful and the target unit has not already taken an action, they may react by opening fire against their assaulters. The opposing player takes an order and puts it as fire. Sometimes this reaction fire may be enough to wipe out the assaulters. Note that this reaction shooting is resolved immediately before any assaulting models are moved. However, even weapons that are out of range count as in range and can shoot, representing the fire waiting for the assaulting model to be in range before firing. So if you have a pistol, then you can wait, but if you have a rifle, then you can't. Flamethrowers and pistols are the only things with less than 12 inches range, I think. There was a table earlier. I'll tell you what, it's easier to find it in the back of the book. There we go. Is anything else? Yeah, so the flamethrower is 6 inches and the pistol is 6 inches and everything else is more than that. So it is only the pistol and flamethrower that gets that. How many models are going to be using pistols these days? Because pistols have lost the assault rule and you never get more than one flamethrower. Oh no, there's an Italian squad that can have 2 flamethrowers. Maybe there will be more. So a lot of this seems to be the same. Combat is resolved. Yeah, so obstacles seem the same. And this is how we'd do an assault on a wall or a barricade, similar thing. The defending models need to be in contact with it to be firing over it. So the attacking models just make contact with it and they count as being an assault. Even if they're not base-to-base contact, everyone's in contact with the terrain piece and so they're all considered to be in contact with each other. Fight the first round of close quarters is an odd way of writing that. That probably implies that the rules have changed slightly. Are there any concern with attacks against infantry crews? Vehicles different. Both the attackers and defenders roll for damage against the enemy simultaneously. Always? Is it always simultaneous now? So all attacks hit automatically. There are no pen modifiers. What? Units in close combat make one attack per man, per model. There's no point taking cover from a hand grenade or bayonet blast. Automatically hit and simply proceed straight to rolling for damage. This is done in the same way for shooting, but no pen modifiers apply in close quarters, regardless of what weapons the combatants are armed with. And no special weapon rules apply, except for assault. Well, it's not assault, it's tough fighters. So pin markers have no effect at close quarters and are ignored. Right. So it's written in an awkward way, but it seems to be the same. So what happens left? The side that has caused the most casualties in the round of close quarters is the winner. The losing unit is destroyed and removed. Any survivors are assumed to be taken prisoner or running away, so on and so forth. Whenever the assault of an enemy has gone across obstacles or rough ground, or when the defender is being fought across the obstacle as described above, the defender has advantage of readying themselves against an onslaught. Instead of both sides fighting simultaneously, the defender fights first. Oh. So it used to be that in open ground the attacker would fight first, and in terrain they'd fight simultaneously. But now, in open ground you fight simultaneously, and in terrain the defender fights first. So it's massively, in both situations there's a more advantage for the defender than the attacker. That does mean that you really need to be sure of your close combat. Because you're still potentially getting reaction fire, and you're not getting to fight first or simultaneously like you used to. But if you're still a veteran squad with submachine guns and you're charging against a standard rifle squad, you probably have advantage there. Are there cover saves in close quarters? It doesn't specify that there are cover saves or not. Let's go back to the cover save rule. Where is rolls hits? Cover saves. So this is talking about it says things like all close quarters attacks against infantry, artillery hit automatically and allow no cover saves. Instead, simply proceed straight to rolling for damage. Does that imply that you also simply proceed to roll for cover saves? It doesn't specify. And in the cover save rules, I don't see anything about close combat. Do cover saves apply in close combat? it's not clear, unless I've missed the one line where it is clear. I would like to think not, but I would also like to not have cover saves. Yeah, so close combat is as deadly as it always has been, because one unit will be wiped out. If you have a draw, you just immediately fight a new round and keep going until one unit is wiped out. So consolidation is now called a regroup. Regroup is D6 inches. Yeah, so that's the same as it always was. Right, so that seems to be the core rules sorted, and that's a very small amount of the book that we've actually got through. We're going to have to read a lot more. How far are we in? We're 50 minutes in. That's not too bad. Anyone still at home? Are you awake? Have you fallen asleep yet? I assume you fall asleep to most of my videos because I'm so boring, but you keep coming back, so it must be something of value. HQ units that are not non-commissioned officers. The lead. So this goes back to, I think, the rule saying that every unit has a leader of some description, but the HQ unit, whatever model starts the unit, is the squad's leader, which does make sense. So the medic, observer, or officer is the unit's leader. An officer model adds its morale bonus to friendly units within 6 or 12. Oh. So LT's here. Rainick is awake, sticking Italians together. I thought that we weren't getting the Italian stuff for a few months, and we've actually already got it. I've got it on my computer already. I haven't looked at it yet. I have some Alpini that I haven't painted, so I should probably get them done. I've got most of my... I've actually used almost all of my Italian models in games now. I've got the Alpini squad, 11 of them that I haven't finished painting. I haven't used them. And I've got a Saharina, what is it? AS-42, I think it is, with various weapons. And that, I've painted that up, but I haven't used it in a game yet. So we'll have to have an armoured platoon with that as the command unit, probably. Yeah, so it looks like first and second LTs are getting the same bonus that first LTs used to get. So +2 morale bonus and 2 order dice, so 2 snaps it looks like, with a 6-inch range. And then the higher commanders are getting the higher of the 2. So it's 4 morale bonus, 4 snaps, and 12-inch range. So is there a difference now between a first and a second LT, and is there a difference between a captain and a major? Or have they just been simplified? We shall find out, I hope, at some point. You cannot take advantage of more than one officer's bonus at a time, and that is relevant because we can have a lot more officers floating around from how the platoon system works. giving everyone 2 snaps does mean that LTs are gonna actually do stuff. Because I've always been of the opinion that 1 snap to action die is almost completely useless. Because if you really wanted that other unit to move, you'd just get that other unit to move. And you would wait on your LT for later. But having 2, now that means you're moving 2 squads at the same time in addition to the LT. Hopefully that makes sense. So an LT can't go down and snap at the same time. So platoon commanders, LTs, cannot issue orders to other LTs. Ha! Alex, you're not watching, but ha! There's a player at our local group who plays, he says he's playing 40k because he has all of his go and then he hands the dice bag to the other player because he has first LT and a major in his 1,000-point list. So that's 6. Well, German player as well. So that's 9 snaps to actions. Wait, no. 2, 4, 6, 7, 8. 8 snap to actions. And he uses the first one to snap the other officer. Selects an officer, snaps the other officer, and then all of the other snaps between the 2 of them moves his whole force. Oddly, he has won games with this. It is not a big advantage, but he has managed to win, so it's not that much of a disadvantage. But you can't do that anymore. You cannot... Well, it says here that a platoon commander cannot issue orders to a company commander, but maybe you can the other way around. So maybe it is still relevant. As long as you keep your higher commander near your LTs. So yeah, I should have read on before I was laughing at that, because you can in fact, from a company commander, issue an order down to a platoon commander, which kind of makes sense. That's how chain of command works. So that doesn't seem to be any different from how it was before. It just means that everyone is getting at least 2 snaps now, rather than your 35-point inexperienced second LT with 1 snap hiding away in a transport shooting in the light machine gun. Given that we're having a lot more officers on the field, potentially, especially if you're having multiple platoons as is intended in this version of the game. Maybe? Yeah, I don't... Other than the extra order dice, I'm not actually seeing any difference here in snap to action. And officers aren't doing anything else. I know someone mentioned that they'd like to see like a wider range of orders rather than just snap to action, but like a bonus to the order that was being snapped as well. I don't know what that would mean, like a bonus to hit or a bonus in movement, ignoring cover perchance or stuff like that. But yeah, it's just still snap to action as before, but with maybe more snaps than you would normally get, or than you would get in second. Medics are exactly the same. Medics are exactly the same. Medics are useless, officially. It was so difficult to use medics in 2nd edition, and these are exactly the same. What we need for medics is kind of a reverse snap to action, where they tag along with a friendly unit. In fact, I would be happy for a medic to have their order die removed from the bag at the beginning of each turn, and whenever another unit moves, the medics followed along, because that means they're always within 6 inches. The problem with medics is that because BoltAction has this random order die system, the infantry unit that they're protecting moves, gets shot at, and the medic's still 12 inches behind them. Out of range, out of reach, and therefore the medic very, very commonly is in a situation where it's not actually getting its chance to use its special ability. And then when it does use its special ability, it's only a 1 in 6 to save a model. And so for every model that it saves, 5 models are dying. And so that unit that you can't keep up with are losing 5 models for the one you saved. It's going to be half the squad. It doesn't matter that you've saved 1 model, half the squad are dead. They're good thematically. Forward artillery observers. Someone was mentioning that you can use an artillery observer as a spotter for a whole platoon. Is that correct? We shall find out. Let's keep reading. What are we at? 5 o'clock, so that's an hour into the stream. Yeah, we can go for a bit longer. So, friendly units using indirect fire. Yes, you can. Let's read it properly. So, forward artillery observer consists of artillery officer model, include other models such as assistant radio ops. Artillery officers are often attached as liaison at company level to coordinate fire. Yes. This is done in various ways, ranging from the use of radio to field telephones and runners. Friendly units using the indirect fire special rule can draw line of sight from your forward observers. Is that just all friendly units? So it's not within a platoon, it's within the army. So we'll have to see if the points costs for artillery observers is still reasonable. British aren't getting the free ones anymore, are they? Because no one's getting free units or free anything. Officers are paying for their submachine guns now. So artillery table is the same. So all units within D6 plus 6 inches of the aiming point are affected. On a 1 to 5, you get D3 pins. On a 6, you get heavy howitzer hit. Heavy howitzer, that's a 4-inch blast. I think that's the same. Was it always a 4-inch blast? I think it was. And the smoke rules don't matter because no one used them. Oh, a 6-inch rate. A 6-inch radius is a 12-inch diameter, right? So that's 30 centimeters, right? So that's a dinner plate worth of smoke. Soft cover and dense terrain. Roll a d6 each turn. On a roll of a 1, the smoke dispersed. 2 to 3, it drifts. On a 4, it stays where it is. Yes, that I'm not sure how much better that is than the old smoke, or if it's the same. But you're giving up the opportunity to put a whole bunch of pins on the enemy, which is going to be more valuable. Although pins keep getting rid of much more easily in this, so maybe the smoke is more useful. Or maybe it's not that the smoke is more useful, it's just that the artillery barrage is less useful. Yeah, so forward air observers. air observers can also be used for indirect fire weapons. And it seems to be that every indirect fire weapon can use one air observer or artillery observer as their spotter. Because it's not saying that it's locked to a specific one, and this model is company level rather than platoon level anyway. So yeah. There's a unit right here, everyone shoot at them. Or yeah, just every enemy unit that model can see. All your HE or your indirect fire can target that. That makes mortar batteries. Could you make 6 medium mortars in a heavy weapons platoon or a support weapons platoon, and an artillery observer? And the artillery observer sits at some tall piece of terrain far away, so long as he can make line of sight with everything, and the mortars just reign supreme. So the one thing I'm worried about with 3rd edition is that spam lists are going to be a lot easier to make. Are they more effective? Who knows? Maybe they're not. So how do you place this? The errata says multi-rocket launchers can't use spotter. Aww. Multi-rocket launchers never were able to use spotters before because their spotter was linked to the unit, and no unit with an MRL ever had a spotter. But come on, let me use my company level spotter, artillery observer, to spot my MRL, please. My 6 Katyusha battery, 5 Katyusha battery armored platoon. The very silly player at my local group maybe is getting me to print him 5 Tachankas for his armored platoon, his horse-based armored platoon. Right, so forward air observer attached ground forces. In the game, they function in a similar way to artillery reservers, but instead of calling in an artillery barrage, they summon an airstrike. Once per game, they receive a fire order. They can call an aircraft to attack an enemy, nominate an enemy unit anywhere within sight of the observer that has chosen. The observer is chosen for the airstrike. Once the target has been chosen, an aircraft can potentially appear at the beginning of the following turn, of any following turn. At the start of the next turn, before rolling the die, roll a d6 and consult the table. When the plane arrives, stop rolling and instead resolve the attack. Yeah, that makes sense. So, on a 1, you get the rookie pilot. Targeting a unit within 12 inches of the original. Why would you write it this way? On a 4-5, like, this is the table of the results for your air observer. On a 4, 5, or 6, you get here it comes, and the entire box says read this that is outside the table. Either put that in the table or don't have the table. Why would you write it this way? It's so clunky. First of all, place a suitable token 18 inches away from the intended target to represent the point where the aircraft opens fire or deploys the payload. I have some Blood Red Skies models, which would be really cool for that. Resolve shooting from flak. Yeah, this all seems... air reservers seem to have not changed at all. And you can still target a vehicle and end up with a strafing fighter, which will do no damage to a vehicle. Although it has +2 pen. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't see any difference there. We use air observers so irregularly that if we do, we'd be reading it out of the book anyway. Unit special rules. Bicycles. They double their run move to 24. Do they also count on roads? Because they are wheeled and they are technically still vehicles, just not powered ones. Cavalry. Cavalry unit moves 9 on an advance and 18 on a run. I think that's the same as it was before. Cavalry cannot enter buildings. That's the same. Cavalry can dismount as part of an advance move. Yeah, it's fine. I do want to finish off my Cossacks because I never got to use the case blue Cossacks were really good, and I never got to use them. Well, I had the opportunity to use them. I just hadn't got around to finishing the sculpting and painting and all the rest of it. And they're there somewhere next to my post-apocalyptic bikes that I also quite like. I don't have any. I've cleared all of my models away to make room for my cameras and books. Oh, that's not true. Distraction. I have a little frog person. That's the only model within arm's reach that I have at the moment, is a little frog person. Hang on. I'll hold up to this camera, see if that helps. That does not help. Can you see this clearly? No, clearly you cannot. Never mind. Engineers. Units of engineers equipped with explosives. To represent this, when a unit of engineers assaults a building, the defenders cannot benefit from defensive position bonus. Is that the thing where the defenders fight first? Yes, it is. So, engineers charging buildings means they fight simultaneously? So a submachine gun armed engineer squad, veteran engineer squad, would be quite effective at charging buildings. Oh! It specifies a building, not terrain. So it's not any like tree line. What was the... Hopefully that's not making sound as I'm brushing against my camera. Microphone. So in the assault rules, defensive position counts for whenever the assaulting enemy has gone across any obstacle or rough ground, or when the defender is in an obstacle or building. But engineers only ignore that if they're charging through a unit in building, which means that if there's a building with a few trees in front of it, they still get to fight first. I wonder if that's a wording issue or if that's intentional, because that sucks if that's intentional. Makes sense, but it still sucks. Fanatics are willing, yada yada yada. So they can't run away if they have loads of pins, but remember that a rally order gets rid of all of your pins. Otherwise, that's the same. So fanatics have a slight boost in the fact that they're getting rid of all pins, but the actual fanatic rule is basically the same. Fieldcraft. This is one that was in a lot of the expansion books for 2nd edition, is now in the rulebook. for third. So fieldcraft units are rigorously trained and therefore treat rough ground as open ground instead. Which means that they can charge through trees at 12 inches and the defender doesn't get their fighting first bonus. Fight simultaneously. Whereas in second edition there were cases where they'd be fighting first because they're treating it as open ground. Like my Alpini that I never finished. Green. So they're inexperienced with the value leadership of 8. So the first time the unit suffers a casualty, so it's not when they're hit, it's when they suffer a casualty, roll a d6. On a 1 they go down and get d6 pins. 2 to 5, the unit does nothing, and on a 6 they go up to regular. Wasn't it a 5 or a 6 that they would go up to regular before? I think green's gotten worse. It might be the same, but I'm not sure. If that is changed, then it's green is not as good as it used to be. I keep knocking my camera and my microphone. I apologise. So, this is another thing that I wanted. Infiltrator is a rule that used to be called snipers and spotters, where they can deploy ahead of the normal deployment zone. No, it is not. So infiltrators, if the unit takes a cover save whilst it does not have an advance or run, it receives an additional. So certain units, stealthy, sneaky units, are getting an additional +1 to their cover saves, as long as they're stationary. In addition, the unit may benefit from special deployment rules as detailed in the scenario being played. That's what I was talking about. So, it used to be called snipers and spotters, and that's where you deploy up to halfway on the board, which interfered with certain game types, so I think moving it to the mission scenario makes a lot of sense. But it was called snipers and spotters, but most of the units using it weren't snipers or spotters. Because forward artillery observers could also do it, and they're kind of spotters, but also scouts were doing it. And there were various, like the American Rangers and the Alpini. Not the Alpini. What's the Italian one? I can't remember. But scout units as well were doing it. And so everyone was being called scouts, sniper and spotter, when it wasn't just snipers and spotters doing it. So calling that infiltrators, just an improvement in terms of terminology. Motorcycles. Seem the same. Weapons can only be fired when stationary. Yeah, that seems to be the same. I think that the MG bike, the German BMW with the sidecar, should be allowed to shoot on, at the very least, in advance order. Although, does that still count as a vehicle rather than a motorcycle unit? Because the motorcycle and sidecar in second edition can be a vehicle or an infantry unit, depending on what selection it's being picked from. It's usually a vehicle because it's usually in the armoured car slot, but there's the... Is it the Moto Guzzi squad? Shirkers. So Shirkers always count pin markers as double for order tests, morale checks, routing, and so on. Right, so an inexperienced with 4 pin markers and they run away. It's the same as before. Sniper! So snipers get +1 to hit. The range is the same. And you ignore cover saves. Again, this is worded Any hits go straight to damage with no cover saves allowed. That implies that the cover save is being done before the damage roll. But in the rules for the damage and cover saves, the damage comes first and then the cover save. Which is it, Warlord? Which is it? If the sniper successfully rolls to hit and damage, the firing player can pick the squad leader as a casualty. NCOs, leaders of weapons teams, officers, medics, observers, and so on. That means that you're not picking weapons operators like machine guns or mortars and machine gun team, like medium machine gun teams where you'd wipe out the squad. So I knew that because there are people very, very sad about that. But the fact that you're getting +1 to hit, that just means 3+. But you're not ignoring... But you are, because the rules for shooting are different. Where's the shooting table? Damage. Yeah. Pins, inexperienced, point blank. Yeah, so it's only pins that are ever going to count. So it's almost always going to hit on a 3+ unless it's pins. So that's kind of the same. And you're ignoring all the cover saves, where previously snipers are ignoring the hit modifiers for cover. So that's kind of the same. Yeah, snipers are still useful. Maybe a little less useful because they're not wiping out weapons teams. But it's not to say they can't harass weapons teams, because if you take out the loader, that's still -1 on their leadership and -1 to hit. Oh, -2 to hit if while they've still got that pin. Stubborn, ignore morale modifiers for pins on morale checks, but not order tests. Tank hunters are equipped with close quarters, anti-tank weaponry, stuff, blah blah. If a tank hunter unit wins an assault and scores damage against an armoured vehicle, the effect is resolved on the damage results table for a normal anti-tank penetration rather than superficial damage. That is... Ooh. That's slightly different. Because usually it's an equal roll as a glance and a beating it as a pen. Unless you don't have anti-tank weapons, in which case it doesn't matter how well you beat it, it's always a glancing blow. But this time it means that tank hunters are always a penetrating hit, assuming even if they're an equal roll. That's how I'm reading it. There may be more later. And Tough Fighters is the same as before. Useful for close combat, although not for pistols, just submachine guns and assault rifles now. Oh, getting into the weeds a bit now. Are we still awake? I don't think I'm still awake. Artillery units. Gun model and its crew. The gun itself does count as a model. Everything needs to be... Oh, hello. The crew are arranged so that they are all within 1 inch of any part of the gun model, which counts as being in formation. That is very different from how it was described before. That means that my artillery, my basing video is now incorrect. Because in 2nd edition, you had to be... The crew had to be within 1 inch of each other in the same way that an infantry squad does. But in addition, every model has to be within 2 inches of the gun's breech. Whereas now, everyone has to be within 1 inch of any part of the gun model. But it doesn't say that they have to be within 1 inch of each other. So what that means that... Are they going to be more spread out? because the guns, particularly the ones with the support legs, as is shown in this picture here, you could have a model 1 inch back from here, and a 1 inch back from there, and a 1 inch from the barrel. So you could end up being, like, how big's an artillery gun? Like 4 or 5 inches easily. They could be really far apart. That, I think, means that artillery crews are going to be much more spread out. Hello, Paulus the Mad. Hello, just got here. Built some orcs and painted up base coats for Char B1 and 2C. How's the BoltAction looking? Say for a newbie to the system. As a newbie to the system, yeah, get straight in on 3rd edition, which this is. A lot of it is the same game. There are, I think, almost everything that we've spotted so far that's changed is more nuanced than actual fundamental changing to the game system. I think the biggest change is probably the cover save. Because it used to be that you'd roll to hit and roll for casualty. So there's 2 rolls. And all of your cover and stuff would affect your to hit roll. Whereas now, it's roll to hit, roll for casualty, and then roll cover save. And all of those cover modifiers are on the cover save. So that's not even a massive change. I think that overall, shooting is a little less effective, but not by much. But again, as a new player, it's not a more complicated system. It's just nuanced. That it's different from some other game that you never played, so it's fine. It's still, so far, we're like a decent halfway through the core. We've done the core rules and we're into things like the vehicles and artillery now. So we've seen most of it, and it's just a case of, for someone like me, it's learning the nuanced difference. But for someone new, it's going to be just as easy to learn as 2nd edition was. Might actually be easier for you because you're coming in fresh without the old rules. I have to get rid of the old rules and bring in the new rules. Yeah, from everything we've seen so far, it's going to be just as much of a fun game, especially with the Char 2C. Big old beast. So, artillery. Yes, we're just discussing that the positioning of models, that does mean that my Ziz 3, which has one model in front of the gun shield and is too far away from the other crew to technically be correct, it means that is now correct in 3rd edition because he is within 1 inch of the gun. Well within 1 inch of the gun. Alright, sounds like it's going to be neat, I guess. Maybe those tanks will get a new use. Yes, definitely. BoltAction 2nd edition is one of the best kind of small army sized battle games that I've ever played, and 3rd edition is just a slightly different variant of it. But that's going to go into things like what counts as a skirmish game, what counts as a small battle game, what counts as a big battle game. What about like miniature models and like 54mm models? Let's not get into that argument here because that is a whole thing all in its own. That's probably a video I should do, because there's some serious discussion about why you would have certain scale of models and why you would have certain number of models. Right. So open sights is a straight shot like it always was. Has to be viewed from the gun's barrel. Yep, that's fine. When firing indirect, you can be from any of its crew or anyone acting as a spotter. So either its own spotter or an artillery observer can act as a spotter for everyone, as we've discussed. So any artillery piece defined as light or medium can be moved by its crew with a run order, and they can only move 6 inches. Heavy and super heavy anti-tank guns and heavy howitzers, as well as any lighter gun whose crew is reduced to a single model, cannot be moved by their crew with a run order, although they can still be rotated with an advance order. So I think that's the same as the errated version of 2nd edition. Although I think we're adding in the having one crew model means you can't move the gun anymore for even a lighter gun, which makes sense. But this is only for artillery, so we still have that 3-tier of fixed weapon where you have non-artillery, light and medium artillery, and then heavy and super heavy artillery having different movement rules. Subtly different movement rules. It's not like massively different. It is just because it's still an advance order to rotate to point in a different direction for everything. That's the same. It's a run order that's different. So the light weapons can run 12 inches. So that's your medium mortar, medium machine gun, that kind of thing. Your light and medium artillery or anti-tank guns can run 6 inches because their crew are dragging the big heavy gun around. And then heavy and super heavy can't move at all, or a medium or light that's only got one crew can't move at all. I think that's the most complex part about the game, and that just goes to show how easy and simple a game this is. If that's the complex thing, and that's not that hard to understand, it's just the way that it's written is not necessarily that helpful. Stop calling this a 45-degree fire arc. That is a 90-degree fire arc, not 2 45-degree fire arcs. Stop it. Did that for the machine gun earlier. At least they're consistent. Gun shields count as soft cover. That means gun shields are way better, because gun shields used to be -1 to hit, but now they're soft cover, which is +2 on the cover save. So they're getting a 5+ cover save. That is better, right? That is better. All of this seems to be the same as before. You can still react fire with an artillery piece so long as the enemy are coming from you straight on. Why is my music stopped? Let's have that one. That one's good. Recruit. Has anyone ever recruited a gun? Anyone watching, if you've played BoltAction, even a single game, have you ever recruited a gun? Because I've been playing for 2 years-ish now, and I have both never done it and never seen it being done. But in 2nd edition, you really only get one artillery piece at any given time. It's only for certain theatres, like Silo Heights, for example, where you can have 2 artillery pieces. Whereas now, in 3rd, you're going to take an artillery platoon, and so you can have easily 2 or 3 artillery pieces, and you can set them up near each other. So I think, actually, we might start to see recrewing of guns being a thing. Whereas we would never have seen that before. Or extremely rarely we'd see it before. Firing smoke. Ha! Oh look, the rule that no one will ever use. Well, let's read it at least, just to see if it is of any value. You still need a 6 to hit, and if the shot misses, nothing happens. No one's ever going to use smoke. If there's a 1 in 6 chance of it actually happening, no one's going to use smoke. If you miss with smoke, the shell has to go somewhere. It just says it goes out of the playing area. You're shooting up to 36 inches in front of you. The edge of the board is 100 inches away. Your shell is not going to end up over there. Let us scatter with smoke at the very least, even if not with HE. We should also be scattering with HE. The shell has to land somewhere. Actually, with HE it makes sense. I mean, to an extent with smoke it makes sense as well, because you can have dud shells, particularly in the 1940s. But like a 2+ at least, or something where roll a scatter. You use the order die, the little arrow on the order die. So everyone's got scatter dice. So that's fine. You roll 3d6, and it's probably 2d6 inches of scatter of movement out, and if it lands so close that it would hit the enemy unit that you're originally targeting, which you're not allowed to hit because you've missed, then it's a dud, right? Because the shell has landed there, but it hasn't hit the enemy unit because it was a dud. So that's how you work that out. So scatter, and if you don't scatter far enough, it's a dud, and if you do scatter far enough, then the shell goes somewhere. Whether it hits another unit nearby or whether it lands in open ground, it doesn't matter. It still exists. It should go somewhere. There you go. Just off the top of my head, I came up with a rule that fixes everything and makes everyone happy. Nothing makes everyone happy. Right, so we're finally on to vehicles. Vehicles, yay! Which I think vehicles is the largest, or the last of the big sections of the rules. Oh, wow, okay. So vehicles there's more to vehicles than there is for artillery, but we have buildings as well afterwards. What are we at? 7:30. Gone 17, not 7:30. Vehicle units consist of a single model. Okay, so they all have crew, even if the crew aren't visible on the model. Usually don't have bases. Yeah, that's all. Yeah, line of sight and stuff all makes sense. Orders all make sense. Oh, good lord. Foobar with a vehicle. Yeah, I'm just going to shoot my anti-tank gun with a 3-inch HE at my own infantry squad that's right next door to them. So vehicles are not allowed to go down. Oh. Paulus says, I'm going to sit down, listen, and continue finishing tanks. Scatter on explosions is fun. Is a bit of a 40k-ish rule, but fun. Yeah, to an extent, that is part of where I'm getting that from. It's just the duds if you're not scattering far enough, because there was always that case in 40k or in other games with scatter where you technically missed and you'd got the scatter, and then you're only scattering the tiniest amount, so you'd still hit the unit that you were originally, and you've already rolled that you've missed it. So that's when you have the dud. But 40k doesn't use scatter and hasn't for several editions now, because it's all dice based. Like an explosive shot, you'll just say, "Oh, it hits 2d6 times," and then you roll to hit with the result of the 2d6 number of hits. I come from like third and a half edition. That's where I played most 40k, and that definitely had blast markers and scatters and scattering into other units and scattering into friendly units. Definitely remember my captured orc basilisk scattering that massive template of strength 9 back into my own orc squad. Bye bye orcs. That happened more than once. Danger close. Danger very close. Pinning vehicles has gotten simpler. Inexperienced and regular will always take a pin from any heavy weapon, regardless of whether it can hurt it or not. Which means that regular vehicles are taking more pins. Fully enclosed veteran vehicles only pinned by stuff that can actually hurt them. Veteran and inexperienced are the same. Regular has been demoted essentially to inexperienced in terms of how it takes pins. That's fine. That makes it a lot. Because that's something that people got confused about. Paula says that Horus Heresy still uses scatter. The Heresy, the 30k and Heresy stuff, I still don't see the point. It's a completely... It's the same game as 40k with completely different rules and a completely different model set. Why? I don't understand it. Just... I don't see why it should have a different rule set, and I don't understand why the models should be so incompatible. Also, I have no interest in 30k to begin with, so maybe I just don't care. Sorry. Vehicles and movement. So we know about interpenetration. We're not allowed to do that anymore. Advance. This order represents the vehicle advancing at a cautious speed. Basic or standard movement for vehicles in the battlefield. Tracked vehicles are 9, wheeled vehicles 12. At any point during this move, the vehicle can make up to 2 pivots around its center. 90 degrees. These pivots can be combined in a single of up to 180 degrees. Does that mean that tracked vehicles are now getting 2 pivots on an advance? Because it used to be wheeled get 2 on an advance, 1 on a run, and tracked gets 1 on an advance or none on a run. Oh, do we get to pivot tanks on a run now? Oh! Note that because a vehicle's hull normally has a rectangular footprint, it may add a couple of inches to its overall movement by pivoting 90 degrees. This is fine. That's interesting that they've actually written that into the rulebook now, because I don't know how useful this is, but there's certainly certain very, like, the competitive tournament players who do this kind of thing, where you deploy your model sideways right up against the forward edge of your deployment zone, so that when you rotate and you're rotating around the midpoint of your vehicle, you get this much closer to the enemy than you would otherwise be. So if you deployed facing forwards, you would have to deploy like that. But if you deploy like this, then you start your move by rotating and then moving, and so you're that much closer or that much further forwards. And that is now in the rulebook as a thing that you're allowed to do. I don't think there's any situation where I'd care enough to actually try that, or complain if my opponent did it, because it's just like, how big of a model do you need to be? Well, it's not necessarily how big of a model, it's the ratio of its length versus its width. So you want a long, skinny model. Like a truck would actually gain more than a tank would. Or like one of those really long artillery tractors. Why do you need an artillery tractor closer to the enemy? You want that further away from the enemy. Whilst vehicles cannot literally run, we use this order to represent they're moving at full speed. Tracked vehicles go between 9 and 18, wheels 12 and 24. At any point, the vehicle can make a single pivot at 90 degrees. So yeah, it seems like tracked vehicles are now getting the number of pivots. Well, that means that the half tracks are less cool, because half tracks are just wheeled vehicles now. No, tracked vehicles. Half tracks are now tracked vehicles. Tracked vehicles are getting the same distance of movement. Tracked vehicles are getting the same movement distance as... How do words? Half tracks are getting the same movement distance as tracked vehicles, and all vehicles are getting the same number of pivots. And so half tracks now have no differentiation. Used to be that wheeled, half track, and tracked have slightly variation, have slight variation between them, but now there's just wheeled and tracked and half tracked vehicles. They're kind of lumped together. Otherwise, that's all. Otherwise, that's the same. Just that half tracks are dumped in with tracked vehicles, and we're getting the extra pivot. So, vehicle-mounted machine guns is... This is what I wanted to know. So, light machine guns, medium machine guns, and heavy machine guns all halve their shots. So, light machine guns are only getting 2 shots, and medium and heavies are getting 3 shots each. Which is kind of what I suspected would happen. And that means, oh good grief, the BA-64 with its poor little... Just the one light machine gun is getting 2 shots. Ugh, yuck. That does mean that the Dushka BA-64 is actually an upgrade. Because you're losing open top, probably, still. And you're getting an extra shot. And the 3 shots that you're now getting are +1 pen. Whereas before, going from a light machine gun to a heavy machine gun was worse because you get 1 less shot. Even if they're extra pen, you're hitting less often. Yes, that makes sense, sort of. A coaxial weapon is usually a machine gun mounted alongside a tank's main gun. It shares the same arc of fire. Coax guns were used as a defense against infantry. A coax can be fired instead of the vehicle's main weapon, but not at the same time. Yeah, so that's the same as well. I remember someone said that it was only coaxes that were getting the half value, but it's definitely every machine gun is getting halved. Pintle weapons. Pintle weapons is mainly used against air targets. Whenever a fully enclosed armoured vehicle fires a pintle weapon against a ground target, the crew exposing themselves to enemy fire, and therefore it counts as open-topped. And all pintle mounts get flak. I think that's the same as it always was. And no one ever brings air. I'm going to start bringing in... I need to bring an air observer. Just for the sake of having brought an air observer. Because no one ever brings air observers. I was thinking about doing it with my Americans in the last... did my tournament video go up 2 weeks ago? I can't remember. Or was it last week? Might have been last week. My last game of 2nd edition, I brought my Americans and I was thinking I should bring an air observer because it's the one unit I've ever taken. It's the one we don't see them very often in our local group. But it seems like air observers are exactly the same as they were before, so I'll take one soon. So multiple targets is the same. Ambushes seem the same. So I think this is the same as second, but with an ambush, it's only the unit that's triggering the ambush that can be shot at. If you have like a machine gun on the other side of the tank that can shoot a different target, technically it would be able to on a fire order, but you can't if you're triggering an ambush onto a fire order. It's only the ambushing unit that can be targeted. Regardless of the above rule, when double-mounted weapons must target the same target. This might be a typo here. A quad-linked heavy machine gun would fire 2 shots per weapon. That should be 3, not 2. For a total of 8 shots, whereas it should be 12 in total. I think that might be a typo there. That might be halving rounding up based on its earlier value of 3 shots, whereas heavy machine guns now have 6 shots. And you cannot... I don't think I've ever heard anyone mixing ammunition types in an autocannon, but apparently you're not allowed to anymore. A flak Verling has to shoot all 4 as HE or AP, depending on whichever you choose. That would be an interesting one to actually use. Shoot 2 shots of HE and 2 shots of AP at like a veteran infantry squad and see what does the more damage. Almost certainly the HE. Because the AP is getting 2 pen. The 1-inch blast is getting 1 pen still. But the rules are different for HE now. That's all the same. Cover saves. When shooting against a vehicle, it is best to take cover saves from the vehicle before rolling for damage. I think that it should just be that way around. Roll to hit, roll for cover, then roll for the casualties and damage. It should just be in that order. And half of this book is written that way, and half of it's written in the other way. And the actual rule for it's written... roll to hit, roll for casualty, roll for cover. It should just roll for cover in the... should be the second roll, not the third roll. Or it should be removed completely because it's silly. Ooh. When rolling to damage soft skin vehicle, this works as normal. A damage roll result of 6+ destroys the model. So soft skins are just dying like flies now. Oh, that means that a rifle squad versus a truck has a decent chance of actually taking it out. Yeah. 12 shots, probably get 2 hits. Or, like, yeah, 2 or 4 hits. And then you just got to get 6 out of that, which is possible. even if less likely. And any 6 destroys it, you'd have to roll on that damage tables. Huh. Wait, how does it... When shooting against armoured vehicles with a heavy weapon, the following pen modifiers apply in addition to the weapon's own modifier. Yes. Additional modifiers do not apply to small arms hits against soft-skin vehicles, but only hits from heavy weapons. Right, so you have to be a heavy weapon first in order to do any damage versus a vehicle. You can't shoot like an armoured carrier in the rear armour and get +1 for being shooting in the rear armour with a rifle. Or +2 from the rear. +1 for the side, +2 from the rear. -1 at long range if you're using a velocity-based weapon. If the target is at point-blank range, it gets +2 to hit and gets an additional +1 pen. Here's a bit of terminology that I think they should have changed. So, as an example, this is in the point-blank range rule for shooting against vehicles. This rule applies to hits from heavy weapons except for HE, flamethrowers, shape-charged airstrikes, and so on and so forth. There should be a specific rule in the game that says velocity-based armor penetration rounds. You could just call it AP because that's basically what it was called in the 1940s. Because it's only really velocity-based AP weapons that are getting the benefit at close range and the detriment at long range when the shot's kind of slowing down. And so having this long list of things that the rules don't apply to is clunky and awkward. Whereas you should say AP gets the... and all these other weapons don't get modified, and then the AP does get modified, rather than everything getting modified except for the long list of weapons. It's a slightly less clunky way of writing it. Other than that rule against soft skins, this seems very similar. You roll to hit. Is there... If the die roll to damage scored the exact minimum needed to do damage to the vehicle... Yeah, so even superficial damage is the same. Although the tables are different. Because we have... I know of this. Crew stunned, additional pin marker, go down. That's it. Nothing. Ah, but there's no turret jam. Or 2, steering is compromised. Vehicle will make 1 less pivot when moving. Ah, so tracked vehicles are getting extra pins, but then they get steering compromised and get less pins. Pivots, sorry. Oh, turret jam. So rather than turret jam being a possible bonus on the other ones, it's actually its own entry now. The turret is immediately jammed in the arc of sight where the closest visible enemy unit lies, or in the forward arc if no enemy unit is visible. Weapons mounted on that turret will only be able to engage in that arc. That's fine. Engine damage. The vehicle receives the slow special rule. Or if it was fast, it loses fast. If it had slow originally, the speed is halved. And a second result of that counts as immobilized, and then we also have immobilized. If a further immobilized result, then the vehicle is knocked out. Yeah, so each one is saying that if you get the same one twice, it kind of bumps it up to the next one. And on the roll of a 6, you get fire, which... yeah, that works in the same way. So this is very similar, but it would usually be the 1, 2, and 3 on the full table because you're rolling d6 minus 3 on the table. So you'd usually get stunned, what was it? Stunned, shaken, and on fire. Whereas it's now a much wider range of possible things. And then on the main table, the actual damage, 4, 5, 6 is knocked out, so that's still the same. 3 is still fire. 2 is still immobilized. Yeah, in fact, I think that table is identical to how it used to be. It's just superficial damage, which happens much less often, is now more complex. However, the most common time you ever see superficial damage is when you're using infantry to attack tanks, but only infantry that don't have anti-tank weapons, like Molotovs or anti-tank grenades. There's a lot of complexity there for something that doesn't happen as often. And I think you could almost just do away with it and have crew stunned. Just every superficial damage counts as crew stunned. They lose their order die that turn, and they get pins. You make it D3 pins instead of 1, but that's it. Massive damage, roll twice. Yep, vehicles become wrecks. Ooh, optional rule, vehicle crew. Once a vehicle has been knocked out, we would normally assume the crew have fallen casualty or escaped and abandoned the vehicle. However, it is possible to envisage a scenario which we wish to know for certain whether a crewman has escaped or been killed, and we allow for crew to try and escape with the following rule. Regardless of whether the crew escaped successfully or not, the vehicle unit is destroyed and the order die representing them is removed from the dice bag. When a vehicle is destroyed, roll a d3 to determine how many crew make it out alive. Place the appropriate number of models around the wrecked vehicle. Now roll 2d6 and move the crew the indicated number of inches back towards their own lines, ideally towards a friendly unit or nearby cover. Move the crew as a single unit. Escaping crew can be targeted by any enemy units in the normal way, including by ambushing troops. If any crew is still alive at the end of the turn, then they escape and are removed from the battlefield. Oh, right, so they only move one turn. Or they only move during the activation that that their vehicle got destroyed on. Crew fleeing a destroyed vehicle do not remain from turn to turn. Yeah, so that if they live, they still get removed. It's assumed that they managed to get away far enough to disappear into the battlefield, into cover and whatever, and crawl away. Or they get shot. So, yeah, it does say that's an optional rule. That's for thematic things. Maybe the crew are carrying some information. Yeah, worth having. But I don't think that's something that we're going to use, because that doesn't really fit with how our missions work. Tanks are allowed to make an assault move to close quarters. Fun. Do we have ramming? Please say we have ramming. Tanks. Oh, so we have a specified version of what tank actually means. It is a fully tracked, fully enclosed armoured vehicles. That means that tankettes are tanks, and half tracks, a lot of them are open top, so they're not. So this does include assault guns, tank destroyers, and other things that are, as long as they're fully tracked and fully enclosed. To assault enemy infantry or artillery, the tank must be ordered to move at full speed or run. And because a run is required, the tank cannot shoot and must move at least half of its maximum permitted. Yeah, that's a run move. I did notice that they've put that in the movement rules, is that for vehicles and for infantry on a run, you actually have to be moving at more than half speed, whereas, unless it's a charge move, infantry charge move, vehicles do have to still move at least half speed. And that's to stop you counting as running and only moving a small distance or not moving at all. Because previously it was, oh yeah, your run move is up to 12 inches. Well, 0 is up to 12 inches, so I'll run 0. But that means I'm counting as running even if I'm not moving. A tank's assault has worked out... Moving the camera again, sorry. See you later, Paul. Tank assault worked out differently if it was as soon as the tank is moved to contact, take a morale check for the target unit. If the check is failed, the unit surrenders or scatters and is considered destroyed, including fanatics. If the morale check is passed, the soldiers hold their nerve and allow the behemoth to pass through. The tank makes its remaining move and may end up in either within the unit's formation, beyond it, or conceivably drove into an assault for the unit. Where infantry models that have been assaulted would otherwise end up beneath or within an inch of a tank, they are moved aside by the minimum distance. An artillery piece that is assaulted by a tank is automatically destroyed, whether its morale value is passed or not. But if the test is passed, the surviving crew may be able to recrew another weapon within 12 inches. People are going to keep artillery pieces within 12 inches of each other more often now. Because we're getting more artillery pieces, we're going to have the option to recrew a lot more often. Oof. Yes. And we do have ramming. Although, at ramming, as exciting as ramming is, I think we have just hit 6 o'clock. And that's the time I wanted to finish the stream. So, I'll leave it there for today. I'll give you a few minutes to post any comments in the chat box before I finish the stream off. Let's put this back here, because that looks cool. Rulebook. Did I just fold it in on itself? Yes. BoltAction, 3rd edition. If you would like, and you can either post this as a comment after the stream is done or in the chat box now, if you would like me to do a second stream where I finish reading this from tank ramming and all of the building rules, but then we also have, after that, we have the army lists and we have the scenarios to look at as well. Is that worth another live stream? Let me know in the comments or chat box for that. But I'll also give you a couple minutes to post in the chat box if you have any other questions, either about what we've looked at today or what I'll be looking at in the future. I do have some BoltAction stuff coming. I actually don't have a lot of BoltAction stuff coming. I've got a couple of Italeri model kits to do the build video and painting video like I've been doing. I've been doing those for 2 years now. Got a couple of those to come. I have a very odd old model kit. It's a 1:48 scale like display model kit rather than a wargaming model kit. So it's a lot more fragile, physically fragile. But it's something that I definitely want to use, and it's a vehicle I want to use in my Soviet army. I also have some slightly more modern stuff. British Army that Airfix put out. I got some of those. It's 2008. So much more modern. I haven't decided exactly what I'm doing for videos on that. But there's all sorts of other artistic paint jobs. I have some interesting ideas for not painting models in the usual way and painting them in a much more stylistic way I need to look at. Oh, Paulus the Mad says, okay, rules sounds quite fun, and if ramming is a thing for tanks, that sounds like it might be fun. The question is, how does army building work, as I was new? So, army building is something we didn't get to yet. I will skip ahead because I did see an example of an army building that will give you an idea It's not a full tutorial. Yeah, here we go. So this is a sample army list that they've put in the book. That's why I saw it before, because that's a natural, it's the natural opening point of the pages of the book. So we have, so this is a full army that you'd bring to a game. We have an infantry platoon, we have a heavy weapons platoon, and then we have an armoured platoon. You can't quite see them in the picture. But if we look over here, so you have to start with a rifle platoon. And a rifle platoon will have your infantry, will start with a lieutenant or equivalent of a lieutenant, depending on the army. And then we'll have infantry squads for the most part. You can have a sniper in there. You can have a commissar for the Soviets. You probably will have the option for medic and artillery observers and stuff like that in your rifle platoon. And so that looks like this. So we've got our officer. We've got an observer of some description. Says forward artillery observer in this example. And then we've got infantry squad, infantry squad, infantry squad. There's also a commissar. For every rifle platoon you take, for every rifle platoon you can take one of a different type of platoon. So in this example, they've gone for a rifle platoon and then one heavy weapon, one artillery, and one armoured platoon. So in the heavy weapons platoon, we've got 3 machine guns. So here is the lieutenant for the artillery platoon, and 1, 2, 3 light machine guns on multi-based. There. We have an artillery platoon, which very similarly has a lieutenant. Can't quite see them, but they're that there and there. That's your lieutenant for the artillery platoon, and then 1, 2, 3 guns is the artillery platoon. And then for the armoured platoon, you don't have a lieutenant so much as you have a command vehicle. So there's 2 vehicles here. It's T-34 and the BA-64, and the BA-64 is listed as a command vehicle. So that is sort of how you start. You always start with a rifle platoon, and for every rifle platoon you can have one of all of the others, and if you have 2 rifle platoons you get to have 2 of all the others, and so on and so forth. So if I want a similar force, I might get away with something like 10 to 20 dudes, since I want to turn 1 box of guys into a small force with a few vehicles. You probably want more than 10 to 20. I would say, for the way that I play, 30 models has been the absolute minimum in 2nd edition, and 3rd edition's a slightly bigger game, and it's slightly more infantry, so probably you want to look at least 30. Like an officer and 3 rifle squads is going to get you that amount, and that's going to be kind of where you start. But then whether you want weapons teams like this or whether you want more vehicles, because you can have up to 5 vehicles in an armoured platoon. And so what I suspect some people are going to do is have 30 models in a rifle platoon and then 5 tanks. That's a thing you can do with 2 platoons. Rifle platoon and a 5 model armoured platoon. But for small games, for learning how to play the game, and this is something excuse me, this is something we're trying to set up for our local group, is to have some practice games, is you just play with a rifle platoon. So don't worry about these other platoons, ignore them, ignore the tanks, and you just have a rifle platoon each. LT, few infantry squads, few special models like medics and artillery observers and stuff. And then you play that at 750 points or even 500 points maybe. But the rifle platoon is where you start. So concentrate on that first. Get 3, 4 infantry squads and a lieutenant, and look at some of the other options in the various lists. Are there other examples in here? Yes. German Blitzkrieg force has a rifle platoon, an armoured platoon, and an artillery platoon, so it's a very similar sort of thing. Going in reverse order, the artillery platoon is just 2 guns. No. The artillery platoon is 1 gun and a vehicle and a lieutenant. So there's a vehicle there. I didn't realise you could just have one gun. Armour platoon at the back is 3 tanks and a motorcycle and sidecar, and the command vehicle is an armoured car there. So that's 5 vehicles in an armoured platoon, although they're relatively small ones. And then the rifle platoon, we have 3 infantry squads, and each of them has a transport vehicle. And there's a lieutenant there. Paula says, alright, so might get some weirder kit bashes. As idea locally was granted pseudo-historical forces. If your local group lets you play with weird, wacky things, and they should, because that is fun, then yeah, go for it. There's an increasing number of people having Conflict 47 models and kind of linking them in with normal BoltAction. Using just BoltAction rules, so you're bringing in Conflict 47 rules, but you are just having an interesting army. There's also there's a few painters that I've seen recently who are doing much more interesting things than just trying to paint realistic style. I mean, sure, if you're a button counter, fine, you find the exact color of paint and spend like far too much money buying the exact model color, the exact color of paint for everything that you paint. Be boring if you want, but there are some people that are painting in like the comic book style with like drawing in the cell shading and the like outlining. That's some really good looking models are coming out that way, and I have seen at least one player paint the entire army in black and white as if it was an old photograph, but not just painting it in the normal way but just with black and white paint, but actually painting in the film grain. And they look amazing. They look really good. They're definitely a skilled painter. If I can find them, I'll post a link in the description of this live stream or on the community. Probably I'll post that on the community tab if I can find it. Another example here. Defenders of Arnhem. It's the British force. Rifle platoon with 4 infantry squads. Heavy weapons team. So heavy weapons platoon has lieutenant, 2 machine guns, 2 Piats, and then the artillery platoon has lieutenant and 1 anti-tank gun, 1 howitzer. So, lieutenant, who are you? Who are you? I don't know who you are. So, platoon commander and 4 infantry squads. That's your artillery platoon. So, lieutenant and anti-tank gun and howitzer. And then your heavy weapons platoon with 2 Piats, 2 machine guns, and lieutenant. Yeah. A whole bunch of stuff. That really is kind of the important thing to look at. That's just those 3. Okay. Start with the rifle platoon. There's a joke paint job I once considered is dry brush white black models and paint the eyes red and make a force of ghosts. Well, I've just painted a whole lot of ghosts a few years back. Over 100 Gaunt's ghosts. Not quite the same thing. Although one of them was made from a Nighthawk model, so one of them is very much a ghost. Alright, so it's now 20 minutes after I wanted to end the stream, so I shall end the stream now. Thank you very much to everyone who's popped past and had a look. Thank you to everyone who has posted in the comments. I think everyone's gone away now. According to the viewer count, there are 0 people watching the stream now. Cool. Well, goodbye to everyone who is watching this as a VOD then. Yeah. That's it. I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and I will see you sometime next time. And let me know if you want to see a part 2 of the stream where I go through all of the second half of the book, essentially. Alright. Bye-bye.